Hey there, in just a moment we'll dive into configuring SSH on multiple Windows Server 2025 machines, and then we'll move into creating an Ansible playbook that will further configure SSH so that we can use key-based authentication. But first, I'm often asked from Windows admins and SQL Server DBAs, how can they get started with Ansible, or they may just not be familiar with Ansible. So I've created a 20-page guide that you can download over at automatesql.com/Ansible First Steps that introduces you to Ansible, and it also walks you through setting up an Ansible control node using Windows Subsystem for Linux, and then also how to configure WinRM on managed or Windows managed nodes so that you can get started using that. So be sure to download that if you're interested in getting started with Ansible. So as you may know, Windows Server 2025 already includes OpenSSH. There's no need to install additional software. However, you do need to configure it so that the service automatically starts up. You allow access over port 2022 to those machines, especially if you're using Windows Server Firewall, or if you're using the Windows Firewall. And you also need to set the default shell for SSH on those machines to be PowerShell, especially if you're going to be using it with Ansible. By default, the default shell will be CMD once you connect over SSH. So the prerequisites, we're going to set service. We're going to use PowerShell and the set service commandlet to set the SSHD service to automatically start up. And then the next step is we're going to use new net firewall rule to create the SSH firewall rule or allow SSH. And then next we're going to set the default SSH shell to use PowerShell instead of CMD. So let's go ahead and do that on one of my machines. I've already did this on all the other ones. Actually, it's part of my image that I use to build these machines from, just so that if you wanted to automate further, instead of having to touch each machine that you spin up, you could add these steps into your unattend file. That way, after Windows is sysprepped, the first thing that happens is that unattend file is ran on the next boot, and you're out of the box. You're ready to go with SSH as far as password authentication. I'm going to go ahead and open up PowerShell as an admin, and our first step is to make sure that we set that service to automatic. There's another way you can do this if you want to do it manually, is to go into the server manager and then click on local server, and you'll see here remote SSH access is disabled. You click that, it will take you through a wizard that you can enable it as well. But again, I wanted to show you the PowerShell state commands. That way, if you wanted to add this into your image creation process, you could do that. So we've set the service to automatically start up. Our next step is to add that firewall rule. And so we've got our firewall rule in place, and now we want to set our default shell to be PowerShell, because most of the modules that we use in Ansible to manage Windows are PowerShell modules. And we're going to use the new item property commandlet to set that registry key to use PowerShell. Now, like I said, I've already done this on SQL 1, 2, and 3, and DC1. Those are the machines that are going to be managed by Ansible in my environment. SRV1 is where my control node is. So DC1 will eventually be a domain controller. SQL 1, 2, and 3 will be used to host SQL Server. So that takes care of the prerequisites. And now the first step we're going to do is use Ansible to connect using username and password, because again, we haven't done anything else but just basically enable the service and enable the firewall rule, or create the firewall rule. So to use Ansible, the first step is we need to define our inventory file, and we're going to define a file named host_initial.ini. We're going to have our 3 SQL servers, 1, 2, and 3, inside of a SQL servers group, and then we're going to define another group named domain controller. So there we could place all of our domain controllers. Eventually I'll configure DC1 using Ansible as a domain controller. And then we're going to set variables. So instead of these variables are going to apply to all groups inside of this inventory file. So you can see that that's defined as all, and then vars. Ansible is going to use SSH to connect. The shell type that Ansible is going to use is PowerShell. And then we have one other variable, Ansible_SSH_common_args. We're going to set strict host key checking to no, because the first time that you use SSH to connect to a remote machine, you're going to be prompted to do you trust that machine? Ansible won't be able to answer that for us, so we go ahead and set this to no, so that we just skip that part. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to SRV1, which is, again, I have Ansible installed inside of an Ubuntu distribution using Windows Subsystem for Linux. And then I also have a couple of extensions installed in Visual Studio Code, which allows me to connect to WSL. And then also I have the Ansible extension here to help me with syntax and things like that. So this is our host_initial.ini file, our inventory file that we've defined. And let's go ahead and we're going to run winping, so ansible.windows.winping, just to make sure that we can connect to those machines. This is going to allow us to test our authentication, and then also to make sure that the service is running and the firewall rule is in place. We do that by running an Ansible ad hoc command using that winping module. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll jump into WSL. Paste that here. So Ansible, we're going to run this against all groups inside of that host_initial.ini file. And then the module is the winping module. The user is administrator, and then we're going to be prompted for the password. So this is the local administrator on those machines. What we want to see here is a ping pong success message. And we have that on SQL 3.2. Let's see, SQL 1. So I did not start that. So I set that service to automatic, but I didn't restart my machine. The actual last step is to verify that the service is running, and I bet if we run this, it's not running because I didn't restart the machine. Yeah, so it stopped. Instead of restarting this machine, I'm going to, well, actually, yeah, instead of restarting, I'm just going to go ahead and start it. Now if we run get service again, we can see it's running. Now let's go back over to our control node and run this ad hoc command again. Now we got success for all 4 machines. Just goes to show you should read your own instructions. All right, next, one of the benefits that you get from SSH is no longer having to use password authentication, which is not ideal especially if you need to save that password somewhere for automation. Instead, it's much more secure if you're using public key pairs. And that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to use you can run these same commands on one of the Windows boxes, but I'm just going to use Ubuntu to go ahead and generate my private public key pair, and then we're going to actually copy that public key over to each one of the Windows managed nodes. But the first step is to generate that key pair, and we're going to use a command named SSH-keygen. We're going to set our key to 4096 bits. I'm not going to change the default. I'm just going to place these in the default location. I'm not going to provide a passphrase. So we can see over here we've got SSH. Again, I'm connected. Visual Studio Code is connected to WSL. So whenever I create these on Ubuntu, you'll see them show up over here in Explorer. So I have an ID RSA, which is your private key. Make sure to store this in a safe location. And then our public key is ID_RSA pub. Our next step is to run SSH-agent bash. This command starts a new bash shell with the agent process running in the background so that we can add our key, our private key to that so that we're not prompted for that every time. So we'll go ahead and run that. Now that we're running that, we're ready to add our private key. And we do that by running SSH-add and then the location of our private key. All right, so the identity was added successfully. Next, we need to add the public key to the administrator's authorized keys file. And if that file doesn't exist on our managed nodes, then we're going to create it using this playbook. And that is located in the C program data SSH location on our server 2025 machines. Now we could do that manually, but again, if you're setting up tens or hundreds of Windows Server 2025 machines, that's going to take a long time and you're going to make mistakes as you copy and paste that over. So instead, we're going to use Ansible to do that for us. Here's a description of the playbook that we're going to create, and you can find this out on the blog post. The name of the playbook is, or the name of the play is set authorized keys on remote Windows hosts. We're going to run this against all of our hosts defined in the inventory file that we pass to this playbook. We'll start by defining a couple of variables: authorized key location, C program data SSH administrators authorized keys, and then also the SSHD config location, which is our configuration file for SSHD or SSH running on those machines, and that's going to be in program data SSH SSHD config. You'll see in a moment the changes that we make to that file. We're going to go ahead and define a handler. So this handler will control restarting the SSHD service if required. Now we define our tasks. The first one being we need to read the public key from file. We'll use Ansible's built-in set fact module to do that. And then we'll set a fact. Our fact name will be public key. We're going to use the lookup, and the lookup type will be from file, and we're going to read the contents of our ID RSA public file. Next, we need to ensure administrator's authorized key file exists and has the correct permissions. So we're going to go ahead and create that. If it doesn't, we'll use windows.win underscore file module to do that. The path is the variable that we set above. Ansible uses Jinja 2 syntax for defining different variables and to make these playbooks dynamic instead of having to hard code all of these in here. The state is touch, so we're going to create that file, and then the attributes are read only is going to be false, system is going to be false, and we're not going to hide this file. The next task is to add the public key to that file that we just created. If that file does exist, then we're going to add this public key to the end. Basically, we're going to insert a new line so that we don't overwrite what's already in that file. To do that, we'll use win underscore line in file. The path is going to be the path that we already set. The line that we add will be the public key. Again, that public key was set by using Ansible set fact, and we grabbed that content out of the public key file. We're going to insert after into file. So first we're going to create is true. So that makes sure that this line is in that file. And then we're going to register the result. So at the end of the play, we're going to return the result using Ansible's built-in debug module. Next, we're going to disable password authentication, and we do that by modifying the sshd_config file. So once we have our key-based authentication enabled, we no longer want to use passwords, so that we go ahead and disable that by looking for this expression, password authentication, and then we're going to set that line that we found using that regular expression to no. Notify, restart SSHD. So we're going to notify our handler if we did make a change to that file. Then we're going to go ahead and tell our handler to go ahead and restart the SSHD service. Let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to use Ansible's Ansible-playbook command to run this playbook. As you can see, I've already got that playbook over here on my control node. Fix that here. So just real quick, Ansible-playbook, you provide the playbook name, playbook_addKey.yaml. The inventory file is still our host_initial.ini file, and then we're going to, this is the last time we're going to use the password authentication. After just a few seconds, you should see that Ansible made those changes for us. There's the output of our debug command, and you can see the handler is going ahead and restarting that service for us. Alright, so our play recap, we can see that Ansible made 4 changes, and if we go out to, let's go out to SQL 1 and then check for that file, we can see that that file was just created. And if we open it, you can use Notepad to open it. There's our public key, and now we want to make sure that Ansible can connect using the key-based authentication. So I've created a new inventory file. It looks just like the last one, except for this step. Or this variable, I changed it to Ansible user from the SSH common args. So the user we're going to be that's associated with this key is administrator, and then we're going to use a private key to authenticate. We'll just use another Ansible ad hoc command, and we'll use the WinPing module again. So I've already defined a host.ini file here, and then this is the new inventory file that we'll use to verify that we can connect using key-based authentication. Let me verify that's correct. Yep. So this time we don't have to provide the username, and we won't get a prompt for a password. So at this point, you can use Ansible to start managing your Windows environments using key-based authentication. If you're getting ready to start rolling out Windows Server 2025, I know it just released within the last month or so, but if that is on your plans to do, especially for the upcoming year, let me know down in the comments. And if you're going to use WinRM, or if you're going to go ahead and switch over to using SSH for kind of some of your automation processes and remotely connecting. Again, if you're just getting started with Ansible, you can go out and grab that guide, automatesql.com/Ansible first steps. And then I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching.